Hey, this is Daniel Grove, and in this video, I am so excited to finally show you how to use the new Blender Asset Browser feature that's been added to the 3.0 stable version in 2021. I've been begging and complaining and confused as to why there was no asset manager or browser for the past year or two, and it's finally here, so you're welcome. That's basically because of me. You're welcome. So it's here. So let's learn how to use it. In this video, I'm going to show you what it is, why it's great, why you should use it, how to set it up and organize all your assets such as meshes and textures into the asset browser. I want to say asset manager really badly. And how to just basically get the most out of Blender by using all your assets and organizing them very nicely. So let's get into it now. Okay, so first I want to talk a little bit about a few things concerning the asset browser. If you don't care about basic information, basic explanations, then just jump ahead to later in the video where I show you actually how to do the specific things that you're probably here to watch. But if you're totally new to Blender and the asset browser, you may want to listen for a minute or two to a few of these things I got to say. So basically what the asset browser is it is going to allow you to access specific assets, which can be an object, such as a mesh or a curve, including materials and textures. Those can be assets, because that's what an asset is. The browser will allow you to scroll through all of your marked assets because you have to mark them. I'll show you how to do that later, and allow you to literally just drag and drop meshes into your scene, meshes on top of meshes, objects, 3D scans, assets you downloaded, bought, whatever. All those things can be easily dropped into your scene, and you can build scenes and objects very fast using the asset browser. You can also manage and maintain your library of materials that you may be building up. All the texture images you've been accumulating and downloading and putting into folders. Hopefully they're in folders nicely organized, because that will speed things up a lot. But now that you have that stuff, we can actually drag and drop those from the asset browser onto your objects in your scene. You can easily retexture and rematerial things in just seconds and get very quick results. And the thing about asset browsers and managers is that it allows you as an artist to be faster. And with creativity, it kind of comes and goes, right? You kind of get in the zone, you have an idea, you got to get it on paper, right? Or on the Blender scene, delete that default cube and get your idea on the digital canvas of Blender. You got to do it fast sometimes. And also, time is money. You're working on the clock, you got to get a lot of stuff done. Being slowed down by finding stuff, importing things, reformatting stuff, converting, fixing things before you actually get to use it and be creative, that totally kills the creative vibe. So the asset browser is great because it speeds things up. Like I said, dragging and dropping instant, super fast, and more importantly, fun. I think that is important to have your creative process being fun. So with that being said, I do need to complain about a few things. I just got to get it off my chest. It also may be educational for you. The Blender Asset Browser is very early in its developmental stage. This is basically the first stable version we're seeing in the public, with 3.0 being released in December 2021. That means it's the first version. It's going to get better and better as the versions go on. And we all know, if you're in tune with the Blender community, Blender is progressing at an astonishing rate, and that is exciting for us because we always need those new features. We always need things to be improved and sped up, and that's definitely happening. So the asset browser is lacking a lot of basic features. And I say this, of course, because I'm not a programmer. I don't know how this stuff works. I don't know how complex and intricate making these features actually work and make them stable is. I have no clue how it all works. So, I'm an armchair programmer because I don't know programming. So with that being said, there are some things that will be added in the future, I hope, and I'll probably kind of cover some of those as we go through, some of the failures and shortcomings of it right now. But fingers crossed, in 2022 is going to be a good year for the asset browser, and it's going to turn into more of a manager and even a modifier and allow us to do better stuff and work more easily with our assets. But I'm in love with it because as a Blender artist myself, I'm kind of a Blender, I guess they call it a generalist or a CG general artist, but I have kind of narrowed down on the things that I enjoy making the most and the things that I'm best at, which is environmental design, hard surface modeling, and sci-fi art, things like that, and occasionally fantasy related stuff. So that's what I love to do. Now, when you find your niche, whether it's automotive design, interior design, architectural design, whatever that thing is for you, you'll probably find that you are recreating some things over and over. You're making that same studio backdrop with the 3 light setup. You're making the same basic wood textures or metal textures or grime or paneling or lights. All those things you're recreating over and over, and that is time wasted. It's inefficient. It's slowing down the creative process, and we need to get those things out of the way and do them one time, which could be tonight or this week, and then you'll never have to do them again because everything will be maintained by the asset browser, and you can drag and drop, and it's so easy. Okay, so a huge part of using the asset browser is organization. So as an artist, a lot of times we are disorganized. And if that's you, you got to stop it. You got to get your life together, put your stuff in folders, name the dang folders, and put those folders in a folder that has a name, and so on and so forth. So get organized before you dive headfirst into the asset browser, because if you don't, in a week or a month or a year, you're going to be kicking yourself because everything is a huge mess. So you do kind of have to start off with some organization and some plan to basically have your stuff in the correct folders, because folders are very important. So Blender does work with the files you already have in order to organize and access the assets that are inside of blend files. So let me explain. On my D drive, I have a folder called Blender. And in that Blender folder, I have all of these different folders. So let me explain what the relevant ones are that we'll be accessing today. So inside of Blender files are all my Blender projects, including their render images. Not very organized, but I found that it works for me to keep them in one place. Kitbash is a folder for various things such as Kitbash 3D buildings I've bought, and a bunch of Kitbash related stuff like nuts and bolts, pipes, greeble panels, all kinds of different, robot pieces, joints, hydraulics, sensors, all that junk that I found online. A lot of stuff like this. And you can find kits like these online for free and also for very cheap. If you need this type of stuff, it's out there. You just got to go find it. So I've been collecting the freebies that I found online for quite a few years now, just letting it sit here because I knew one day I would have the technology to organize it and use it efficiently in Blender. And today is that day. So that's what's in Kitbash. Maximo, I got a few 3D models that I've downloaded for a few things. You can get those for free online, including animations like walking and jumping and doing things. Megascans is from the Megascan library, a lot of landscape pieces. Models is like random 3D models like Star Wars stuff, mechs, horses, a lot of random, kind of disorganized. At least the big mess isn't contained into one model folder. These are different file formats such as FBX, OBJ, and some blend files. In shaders, I have a whole bunch of blend files that have mostly procedural shaders that I found online for free to cover all kinds of stuff like wood and smoke and metals and different stuff that, I didn't want to take the time to make because it was already made. So they look good. So I saved it. And there's some in there that I've made as well. Sketchfab is just what it sounds like. Everything from Sketchfab that I find interesting. 3D scans, landscapes, building pieces, rubble. There's also some kit bashes in here you can find online if you need some kit bash to practice with. And textures is kind of a newer folder I've made lately of textures, mostly that I've made from scratch, and that are not downloaded from online, which I do have in a different folder. But these are things that I've made or generated myself. All right, so with that said, let's jump over to Blender and get the folder set up correctly. So I'm going to use this bottom window because we're not modeling just yet. So I'm going to change my editor type to Preferences. And then Preferences, I'm going to go to the very bottom tab, which is File Paths. So here it is, Asset Libraries. If you don't see this, you're not using the right version of Blender. I'm actually using 3.1 Alpha, which is the K-Cycles X build of Blender, but this will all look exactly the same if you're in the normal Blender 3.0 stable version, which came out, I think, December 4th in 2021. Get it if you don't have it already. So here we can see I have these named according to what the folder is named. I've got my Kitbash folder, my models, Sketchfab, Megascans, shaders, products, which are things that I actually sell online, Blender Market and Gumroad. Shameless plug, you'll see the link down below. And an asset library folder, which I'm kind of playing with. I'm going to keep it or not. I'm not really sure. Right now I have just a general blend file with a whole bunch of materials in there that I'm using. So I'll show you how to build those later. So you have to point the directories to the right place. Now, what's in these directories? Blend files. Blender can only work with blend files as far as assets, because inside those blend files are assets that are marked assets, which Blender will see and allow you to grab and pull into the new projects that you're building. So with that out of the way, let's change this back to the 3D viewport. I'm going to open up the asset browser up top and make it a little bit bigger so you can see what mine looks like. Now, when you first open it up, it's by default set to current file. What that means is it's looking within this blend file, which there is literally nothing, just a light and a camera. Okay, not literally, figuratively. Okay, facetiously, there's nothing. There's just a camera and a light, okay? There's no meshes, and on top of that, none of them are marked as an asset. So there is nothing. Even in the unassigned, there is no assets in this blend file yet. But if we change this to these guys, these are libraries, okay? Catalogs will be inside of these. That's like a subfolder. But these topmost root directories are called libraries. So if I go to my kitbash library, we've got some catalogs here. We've got all, and then inside there's a subcatalog of buildings. Then there's kitbash parts and unassigned. Unassigned is any asset that is not yet in a catalog. Now, when I first do this, it's quite slow. It does take it a second to load all the thumbnails. I think that's mostly what it's doing, is it's getting these thumbnails. I'm not sure if this is some kind of like rudimentary render or if it's saved as an image file somewhere. I think it might be some kind of render. That's why it takes so long when I load mine, because I have a lot of stuff in here, and some of it is kind of high poly. So let me go to kitbash parts, and I actually have subcategories, because you know me, I love the organization. That way I can find where the heck my stuff is, right? I'm not doing it just because I like to complicate things. I'm doing it because this is a part of being a creator, is being organized, whether you like it or not. Get used to it. So under here, I've got a few collections that I've made over the weekend. Let's go to advanced parts. I'm clicking on it now. It's going to take a few seconds. It's loading. It's loading. Here we go. So these are some pretty high poly 3D assets that I've downloaded. And with it here, I'll just show you real quick why I love the asset browser, because I can click and drag and boom, I've got a piece. And boom, I got a piece. And then boom, I got something else. And ooh, look, what the heck is that? I don't know. But in just a matter of moments, look at this amazing piece of art. I mean, I am going to sell this as an NFT and be a billionaire. Step aside, people. Okay, so let's come back to reality. So I've got this organizational system going on, and I like where it's going. It's very useful for me because I know where my stuff is. If I get assets from a specific guy that makes, these assets all the time, I'm going to keep them in a specific category, name that. So OU, I forgot what the guy's name. I think it's Oleg something. He's on ArtStation and Blender Gumroad. He sells a bunch of really cool assets and occasionally stuff for free. Let's talk about organizing a Blender file with a whole bunch of different meshes, turning them into assets, and putting them in the asset browser for future use, such as kit bashing, scene creation, things like that. So I just opened a blend file from a guy named Spacehead, and on blendswap.com, he's got 4 different things you can download for free. There's one for spaceships that I really like, and there's 2 that are kind of like building greebles, and this is just like a general sci-fi, could be spaceship, could be building. Got like an engine thruster, some antennae, cool stuff. So that's what I've got open. So let's turn these things into assets, and I'll show you some really good steps to do before you start solidifying your asset browser. So here are my objects. I'm going to press A to select all of them. Now, before we mark these as assets, let's do a few things. Let's first apply the scale and rotation. So to do that, with your object selected, press Control A, and I'm going to apply the scale to make sure all the scales are set to 1s. And then I'm going to reset my rotation, apply my rotation, so that if anything is accidentally rotated and you don't really know it, it's going to set all your rotations to 0. And that's good, because if you don't, your little thumbnail that the asset browser will make later will be sideways. So with my scales and rotations applied, the next thing we want to consider is the origin point of these objects. With something that you're going to be sticking on the ground, like if you're doing interior design, you've got furniture, you've got walls and things like that, you may want your origin point to be on the very base bottom so that it lines up with the floor and things like that. If you don't care about origin points, then just skip this step altogether. But if you like your origin points to be on the bottom of certain objects, then let's go to a side view. We can see all the origin points are all over the place. Press N for your side panel. By the way, I'm going to shrink this. We don't need this just yet. Go to Tool, and then select Origins. Now select your median point. This drop down may actually be at the top of your view right here, but for some reason on the bottom. Next to the word global, click on it and choose median point. Now you can press S for scale and Z. So we're going to scale all the origin points, not the object, but just the origin points on the Z axis. Now normally I would press 0 here and enter, but when I do that, for some reason this is actually like making my stuff disappear. I honestly have no idea why that's happening. So instead press S, Z, and then .0001. There we go. So it's almost 0, close enough. And now look at that. All the origin points are roughly lined up on the same plane. And now we can actually move the origin points downwards to be at the base assuming the base of your objects is on, the same horizon, which they're not quite, but it's close enough. So I'm going to press GZ. G is for move, and Z is for move on the Z axis, and there we go. Now the origin points are near the bottom of the object. Again, not perfect for like this guy over here. It's a little bit high. If you want to fix something, you can select the object, tab into edit mode, press A for all, and then GZ to move it downwards. And if you see that little orange dot now, it's roughly right there. Okay, so the origin point is perfectly on the base. That's how you can quickly move your origin points for a whole bunch of objects. So we fixed and applied the scale and rotation. We fixed the origin point. Now what about naming? Look over here. Cube 001, cube 002. Do I want my assets to be named that? No, I don't. Those are completely useless names to me. So I can batch rename stuff. Did you know that? You can actually batch rename your objects all at once super easily using Control F2. Now that's on Windows. I don't know if that's the same on Mac. Forgive me. Just Google it. Batch rename in Blender for Mac. I'm sure it's something similar. So I'm going to click and drag my box select over these guys. I can do Control F2, and this little guy comes up, batch rename. This is important. Change type to set name. We're just going to set the name. We don't want to put in a suffix or a prefix. We just want a new name to wipe out the old boring, geometry names. So name, what are we going to name these guys? One thing you could do is name it after the creator, name it after the genre, or you can grab little groups of objects that are similar, like a bunch of antennas, and name it antenna, and it'll actually add numbers after it. Antenna 001, antenna 002, and so on and so forth. I'm just going to call it space greeble. And I'm not going to pluralize it because there's going to be numbers after these. So it'll be space greeble. Click OK. And look at here. Voila. Space greeble 001, 002, all the way down to 29, which are actually 30 greebles here. Very cool. So now that we've got namings done, I think we're ready to finally add these into our asset browser. So again, I'm going to box select these guys over here in the outliner, which I have set to view layer, by the way, if you don't have that. Simply right click and mark as asset, and look, boom, they're already showing up in the asset browser. You may have noticed the text size jumped all over the place for a few seconds there. That always happens. I don't know what's going on. That also happens in the normal version of Blender 3.0. Not sure what's happening, but I'm sure it'll be worked out in future versions. So these are in the unassigned catalog down here. This is kind of a default catalog that'll never go away. And it's good because it shows you what has not been organized yet, which is in this case, just these guys. So where do I want to put them? We need to put them in a normal category that we've actually named and strategically created for this. So this is definitely a kit bash part. And I'm going to go into my Spacehead subcatalog. And I'm going to make a new catalog here by pressing the plus button, double click to rename it, and I'm going to call these Space Greebles. Pretty sure I spelled that right. There we go. And they are still not in this catalog. They're still in unassigned. So with these selected, which you can box select, or you can just press A to grab all that are present, click and drag them into Space Greeble. There we go. Now they're gone. See, unassigned is empty. That's a good sign. That means your messy floor is now clean. And they are over here in the Space Greeble catalog. Awesome. Now, let's say you change something. You change a material, you edit it, you change the orientation, but the thumbnail is old. What you need to do is refresh the thumbnail. So press in for the side panel, click on your object that has an out-of-date or inaccurate thumbnail, and just click the refresh button. It does a little automatic basic render, and there it is. You can only do this when you have the source file open. So the source file is a blend file that an asset comes from. Now next, we're going to open a brand new blend file that is not the source file. And what the asset browser is doing is it's referring to this blend file up here, spacegreebles.blend, and it's finding these assets that are marked as asset. If I have anything in the scene that I did not mark as an asset, which by the way, shows this little library thing, right? It's in the library. It's in a catalog, so it is recognized as a usable asset. It will find those objects only and give me access to them in a different blend file. That's all the browser does. It literally just lets you browse through other blend files with marked assets. So before we jump into a new blend file, you do have a few things here that are good to know. There's description, there's author, that's awesome. If you need to keep track of who made what, say you're paying someone for this, or you just want to keep track of where stuff comes from, you have these things down here. You can even add tags like keywords, and you can search for these later. Speaking of which, there is a search bar here. You can type in text to find things. You can change your thumbnail size. Under the view dropdown, you got some select modifiers like inverse and none, box select, And under edit, you only have undo. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of stuff added here soon, but before we move on, we have to save changes, because what changes have we made? Well, we did fix the orientation and things like that, but the biggest thing we did is we marked these as assets, a little library icon, right over here. But that's a change to the file that we need to save. If we don't save this change, it cannot see assets in this file, because technically, if we don't save this change, there are no assets. So let's go to File and Save. All right. Now we can jump to a brand new blend file. There we go. Open our asset browser over here. Go to Kit Bash. Expand the Kit Bash parts. Scroll down, expand Spacehead. Scroll down again, and Space Greebles. Here we go. And here they all are for your Space Greeble creating pleasure. All the assets that we just marked as assets. Now, something I would like to see in the future is the ability to have this generated at the 3D cursor. Let's say I want to have this cylinder pop into existence exactly on top of some other cylinder. I could put my 3D cursor there, maybe double click on it or control click or something, and it will pop up. That would be cool. Also, dropping these onto the grid. If you have your snap turned on, it doesn't care. It doesn't matter. There is no snapping for this current placement. Now, it is cool because if we have a shape, which we do here, I can actually put things on different faces, and Blender sees the face. See that? It's kind of automatically snapping. So that's nice. I do like that. And that's pretty smart and useful when you have very basic shapes you're putting things on. But it's not quite enough control. I would still like to see some snapping to the grid or some origin point creation. Also, a few things that are not yet supported in the asset browser as of right now with 3.0. Maybe 3.1 official will fix this, but we cannot, we can no longer make a collection and all of its included objects as a single asset. That actually was a feature in 3.0 beta when it was the beta release. You could use a collection as an asset, and that was awesome because you could just drop in a whole field of trees or drop in a whole robot arm, right, with separate objects inside. That was removed because it's not quite stabilized yet, but it is in the works. That is something that was very useful and is very complained about. So collection assets are on the way very soon. And also you cannot yet do node groups. Same thing with that. It's not quite stable and perfected yet in the coding and all that stability things that I don't understand because I don't get paid to do that because I'm not a coder. And I can't wait because if you follow me for any time, you know I love me some collections and node groups. They are both efficient time savers and allow me to be a faster and more creative artist. So, all right, so I've just shown you how my various Kit Bash assets and also my landscape 3D scans and things like that are all coming from different blend files. And that's okay because they're all coming in here. Ultimately, I can put them in any category that I want. But what about materials? Materials is probably something that you guys care more about. And honestly, some of you probably just skipped right here and right now just to learn about how to make a huge asset library of your amazing materials and textures. So let's get on with that. All right, now let's talk about materials, making the material solid and workable and flexible for future use, and then putting it in our browser to use in future projects. Let's make a new blend file. And what I'm doing right now, I made changes, but I have one big blend file that contains all my materials that I've made. Here it is. It probably looks a little confusing at first, but it's really very simple. The very top portion up here is the asset browser. The middle is the shader editor, which just allows me to create the nodes and attach everything correctly. And the bottom is just a preview. All I've made here, which is very helpful, I encourage you to do this too, make a large plane, make a cube with some maybe rounded edges if you like that, and make a nice round sphere. It just helps me visualize what the material looks like on different shapes, make sure it's all working correctly until I move on to the next material. So let's get rid of this material and I'll make a brand new PBR based material. I'm going to make it based off some chip textures that came from the displacement free program. So I'm going to name this chip. I'm not sure what number yet, but I'm going to find out when I start creating it. So up here in the shader editor, let's get this thing set up. You're also going to get a quick tutorial on how to properly set up nodes for a PBR texture. Now the Node Wrangler add-on can do this automatically. If I select the principled BSDF shader here, which basically generates, a realistic looking surface, if I press Control-Shift-T, I can actually load a set of images such as these for chip 07. So there's a roughness, there's a metallic, there's a normal map, there's a color, there's a displacement. So we've got 5 maps here. And if I click on Principled Texture Setup, look at that. It automatically connected them, but it only got 4 of them. So which one is missing? It's the metallic texture. This is my issue with Node Wrangler and why I don't always use it for this first step, because it's not always right. Sometimes if the suffix or the spelling is off, it's going to not be accurate and it won't do it automatically for you. So let's back up, and I'm going to show you how to do it manually so you can do it the right way. And delete all that extra stuff. So Shift A, search, look at image texture. If you want to name these things, you can, but you don't have to. So I'm going to name this first one color, next one metallic, next one roughness, next one emission, which not all textures have it, but if it does, at least you have it there to use. You can even, collapse it if you feel like it's not very popular. Let's name this next one displacement, and this last one normal. Normals, there we go. Okay, Shift A, let's add a normal map mode, and then add a bump node. I don't use micro displacement, which uses this displacement right there. I don't use that for a number of reasons, mostly which is poly count and processing time. But I like to use the bump map because I feel like it gives a nice result if you have good textures to use. So lastly, plug this bump into your normal input, and there we go. We got a normals map guiding the bump displacement. Plug in your emissions into emission, or leave it unplugged in if you don't have any, if you're not using it. Plug in your roughness to roughness, metallic to metallic, and color to color. Oh, I forgot one thing up here. Let's duplicate color and put it over here. Don't drop it on the cable because this will happen. You don't want that. Control Z, Shift D to duplicate it and put it outside the noodle. Did you know that these are called noodles? Yep, that's what they are. Let's name this AO. That stands for ambient occlusion. A lot of PBR textures you download online will have an ambient occlusion map, and it's nice for adding some detail and realism. But to use it, we do have to use a mix RGB node. Mix RGB, that is one word. And you can drop this one on top of the noodle right there. Move it down, change your blend mode to multiply, drag it AO, and plug it into color 2. You're probably just starting to get overwhelmed, especially if you're new to Blender, thinking, oh my gosh, Blender is so much work. Well, we are literally programming the guts of a physically based, realistic shader, and it takes a little bit of work up front. But the cool thing about this whole video and why you're hopefully watching this is so that you don't have to repeat this ever again. And you really won't for the most part, because this is going to become an asset, and we won't have to reprogram this anytime we use it in the future. All right. One more thing is we got to set up the UV coordinates. So super easy. Shift A, type in COOR for coordinates. Shift A again, type in mapping. All right. Now let's use the UV coordinates into your vector at the very first one. And then this is going to go to all of these. But watch this. If I go to add, layout, and click reroute, look at this. See this little dot here? This is awesome. I can connect this to the dot, and then this dot to everything else. What may be a super messy node creation of yours. All right, it just splits up the signal so that all these image textures, which will overlay perfectly, that's the whole idea of texture maps, they will all have the same UV coordinates, and they'll all overlay how they should. Oh, let's turn this all the way up. There we go, cool. Okay, so let's start loading some stuff up in here. Let's grab the color map, and I'm just gonna use chip 07. So the color is this obnoxious lime green. There is no ambient occlusion, so I'm just going to turn this factor to 0. There we go. See what that did? We were adding blackness on top of the image, but at 0. We have a metallic map right there, MET. We've got a roughness map. We've got a roughness map right there, RGH. Let me see if we have an emissions map. We don't for this one, so I'm just going to leave that blank and press H to collapse or hide it. Displacement, we do have that. Just black and white. It's just black and white data for the height. And then the normals map has that weird bluish purple thing going on. It's actually right there. 7 normal. Make sure you get the right one. All right, so let's look in here and see what's going on. We got some simulated depth because of the bump map and the normals. We got some reflective areas, some non-reflective areas because of the roughness map and the metallic map. And this thing looks beautiful. Look at that, totally usable. You can use this on anything. You can scale it up and down. By the way, if you do want to scale something, the easiest way to do it is click and drag from this scale of the vector, click and drag down, it multi-selects them all. And now before you let go of your mouse click, keep holding it down, you can drag left and right. So if I increase my scale, it's just sizing down. It's kind of confusing. The higher number is a smaller image. And yeah, it's weird. Smaller number, closer to 0, it's going to be very large, but that's okay. This image is pretty high definition. I think it's an 8K texture image, so there's no pixels visible. And yeah, that's how you scale your texture. We've done the hard work. Let's do a few little housekeeping things before we make this a final asset. We need to name it accurately. I encourage you to always name your material asset as close as you can to the original image. That way you can backtrack and find where those images are. If you need to search for them, let's say they get lost or misplaced, or if you need to find the creator, you can go to someone's website and hopefully find the same file names listed there. So chip07 is what I downloaded from CCO Textures, and that's what it'll always be for me. That way they don't get mixed up, and I don't have to go recreating the wheel while making clever names for everything and forgetting what I did. All right, now because I'm going to use this same template for future PBR texture assets, I am going to enable my alpha settings by switching my render engine from Cycles over to Eevee. Now go down to your Materials tab, change your find your Settings tab right here. It's further down. It's near the bottom of these collapsible tabs, and find your blend mode and change it to alpha hashed, and then your shadow mode to alpha hashed as well. So just in case you have any alpha channels in your texture for future textures, this will already be set up. You don't need to worry about it. And also in case you have alpha and go to Eevee, it'll work fine. But for some reason, these settings are only accessible in Eevee, even though they apply and affect Cycles. I don't know why. See, now I'm in Cycles, it's not here. And that's frustrating. So one more thing is change your displacement to displacement and bump. In case you do use your displacement over here, this purple guy, that'll be set up for you as well. So we're just trying to make a super universal shader that we can use for all kinds of stuff in the future and less work later, right? So this thing is done. I'm going to right click on it right over here in the materials and say mark as asset, and there we go. It is now an asset. You can see the library icon right there. So let's say we want to do another one. We won't have to do all this work again because it's already made for us. So watch this. If we click new material, add a new material, this little double page icon actually makes an identical copy that's also unique. So now all we have to do is change these image textures. So click on File, Open. I'm going to make a chip 06. So 06 color map, 06 metallic map, 06 roughness map. There's no emissions, skip that. Go to 06 displacement, DISP, and 06 normal. In just seconds, I use this complex node setup that I've already made once, but I loaded totally different images in here, and I already have a new material ready to mark as an asset, and that just took me a few seconds. So if everything is good and solid, make sure to fix your name, chip 06, enter, right click on it, and mark as asset. If you want to see your materials in your file, you can actually go up here, change this to Blender File, and go to Materials. I have quite a lot of materials here, and there they are, chip 06 and 07. They are marked as assets, indicated by that library, little book icon next to it, so we're good to go. Now let's put them in a catalog, and they will be ready to use forever after unto eternity. So we've got our asset browser up here. Go to Unassigned, and here they are. And these previews don't look great. Let me see if I can hit refresh and fix that. They're still pink. That is because there are image textures that are technically missing. And by that I mean not actually loaded. So because there's no emissions and no AO up here, it's making them pink. So let's just, I guess, skip this step for this one. There we go. This is just kind of hanging out here. And then same with the emissions. I'm just going to unplug emissions. Okay, let's try to refresh 06. Click refresh. Takes a few seconds, and yeah, that fixed it. So we need to go to 07 and do that as well. So I'm going to switch over to 07 and unplug my emissions because it's not being used, which generates a pink overlay. It's saying, hey, there's an image texture not present. And let's see if that does it. Let's see if the AO will mess with it. It didn't. Okay, cool. So I don't need to undo my AO, though it's not even really being used. I could just delete it if you want, but you need to make sure that color is still plugged into base color. There we go. So there we go. Now we need to add these to material up here somewhere. So I've got sci-fi materials, and I've made some basic categories here for myself that are really helping me. So abstract, I've got some really weird stuff like energy, holograms, transparent lines, things like that. In the detail, I've got some really detailed textures that have greebles and stuff already on them. Let me make this a little bigger for you. Lots of cool sci-fi stuff for panels and corridors. Metal is just, what it sounds like, various types of metals, including some grates and grills and bumps and others, just weird stuff I couldn't figure out where to put it, like glass and rubber and, mattress padding. And then the Ultimate Metal Shaders catalog is for all the different metal shaders that I've made that I actually used in a demo for the product that I sell, called the Ultimate Metal Shader. It is awesome. Go get it if you make metal stuff. Just go get it because it's great. And it's on Blender Market and Gumroad. So where was I? Oh yeah, my unassigned materials here. Let's put these in the detail catalog right there. Just drag and drop them. There they are. And they are ready to use. Well, that's it. Thanks so much for watching this video. I hope that it was educational. Hope you learned something new and some tips and tricks from me that will speed up your workflow and allow your creative juices to flow faster and get your stuff made quicker. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel, like the video, comment down below, let me know what you'd like me to see covered in the future. If I messed up anything in the video, you can blast me down below. If you have any questions, things like that, let me know and I'll get back to you soon. Thanks for watching and have a great week blending.